guest is Adam Minter. He is the Kuala Lumpur-based correspondent for Bloomberg View blog, and he is the author of Junkyard Planet, Travels in the Billion-Dollar Trash Trade. A fascinating book, probably an area, well, certainly an area most of us don't think about, and we really should. Thank you for being with us, sir. We appreciate having you.
It's an absolute pleasure.
Let me ask you, in the book, you uncover, if that's the right word, what I think is a really little known to most of us, but a multi-billion-dollar a year and growing international industry based on things most of us consider useless trash.
Right. And that was the idea. Is I wanted to show people just how important this hidden globalized trade, which is what I call it, is to their lives. Most of us, when we think about recycling, we think about the stuff we throw into our blue or green bins or whatever color it is bin you have, and then it gets transformed into these nice products, recycled greeting cards, that kind of thing. We think of it kind of as a niche, but the reality is that all of us in every way are touched by recycling and recycled goods every day. Roughly half the world's copper supply, which goes into your iPhone, which goes into the wiring in your house, is recycled. And most of us don't think of that when we're tossing the newspaper into the bin. So I wanted to really bring that to life and sort of add color and depth to this thing that we kind of know is out there, but really have no idea about the scale of it.
You make the point in the book that most of the world sees and understands the value and, if I can say it right, continued usefulness of all kinds of products that we in the developed world, Western Europe, Great Britain, the United States, and I think we probably are the greatest offenders, the United States, but things we just toss out, other folks say, that's got value. We can use that.
Right, exactly. And I mean, most of the world is the developing world. Most of the world isn't as wealthy as we are in the United States and Western Europe, in Japan and Australia, New Zealand. So when we throw something away, whether it, I like to use the example of iPhones, for example. A lot of people turn in their iPhones right now to get themselves, new iPhones. What happens to those iPhones? In a lot of cases, if they're older iPhones, they'll be shredded and turned into new raw materials. Those iPhones in other countries are good new iPhones. Africa, Asia, India have thriving markets for our used iPhones. People here who would think about an iPhone 3 as something that needs to be disposed of, somebody there will say, this is my first smartphone, and it connects me to the rest of the world. So those are the kinds of things that really excite me. And I think those are the kinds of things as Americans in particular, because we throw away more, per capita than any other country on earth, really need to start thinking about and maybe reevaluating how we approach even our consumption patterns.
And vast fortunes are being built on what we say is worthless. Chuck it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, most of us look at the local junkyard and say, well, nobody could have gotten rich off of that. But in fact, reality, there are massive fortunes that have been built on this, both in the United States and Europe, the developed world, but also in the developing world. I mean, we actually have scrap metal and scrap paper companies listed on the New York Stock Exchange, on the NASDAQ, and if you go to Asia, they're listed on the Hong Kong exchanges, and those are just the public ones. In my experience in Asia, you will find some of the largest companies worth billions of dollars of revenue as private entities that are hidden from view, but make vast fortunes out of recycling, repurposing, and selling the stuff that other people don't want.
And you say that this international trash trade is really fundamentally transforming our economy and our environment.
Oh, absolutely. And just sort of back up on that, it's nothing new. I mean, people have been recycling. Recycling didn't get invented in the 1970s when people said, let's start tossing our cans into green bins. It goes back to the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, or as I say in Junkyard Planet, it actually goes back to, the first time somebody said, let's turn a sword into a plowshare. When you are transforming things into new things and finding new uses for them, you are recycling. It's just the term recycling really didn't come into common currency until the 1970s. Now, as we enter a stage of globalization where there's more and more demand for the raw materials that we all want, there's more and more need to repurpose, to reuse, to recycle the things that we used to take for granted and throw away. And as the global economy adapts to this, as China and the United States develop industries to do that, we're all transformed by it.
And China really is at the heart of this huge emerging economy, and there really is a fundamental is the right word to use, but a fundamental use for all of this trash. So much of it goes from the United States, the Western world, to China, and they find a way to reuse it, recycle it.
Right, exactly. And China is at the heart of junkyard planet. So much of what China imports from the United States in terms of recycling, and I want to dissuade people from thinking this is not stuff that's dumped. China pays for it. They pay for it like a commodity, the way they would pay for iron ore. They'll look at, scrap metal as iron ore. It may be cheaper, it may be more expensive, depending on what it is. But so much of what they import and use as raw materials prior to about 1990 would have ended up in landfills in the United States. Why? Because it wasn't worth very much money. But as China's middle class started to rise up and start manufacturing, the price of everything went up. The price of paper, the price of oil, which is used for plastic. As we all know, there's a lot of Chinese driving, and it's driven up the price of our gas. As it started demanding more and more raw materials, these things that would have gone into the landfill, you have Chinese scrap metal dealers, Chinese scrap plastic dealers, paper dealers come to the U.S. and saying, hey, don't put that in the landfill. I'll buy that from you. I'll send it to China. We'll recycle it. And then we'll sell it back to you as new goods.
You point out as well, there's a downside because recycling is often dangerous. It's dirty work. It's unhealthy work. You focus on a part of China, is it Hunan province?
Hunan, yeah.
Hunan province, where, literally there's an area that's pretty much become a no person's land, if you will. It's just been destroyed by the recycling going on there.
Right, yeah, exactly. And I say this in the book, recycling is a very morally complicated act. We've all seen the documentaries about how certain things are recycled in China. I've been to those places. I've been to worse places than some of the ones you see in the documentary, and I describe them in the book. These are the difficulties associated with a developing country. China, if it wasn't importing recycling and using recycling for its raw materials, it'd be digging oil wells, and I can assure you those wouldn't have the same safety standards that we apply to, say, oil drilling operations in North Dakota or Texas. These are very, very hard issues, and I certainly don't excuse them, but I do want to explain them to people. In the United States, in Europe, in Japan, trash and recycling are always in the top 10 most dangerous professions list. It's just dangerous dealing with what other people don't want. Now, when you shift that over to China, it's going to be more dangerous because they don't have the health and safety protections. They don't have the regulatory regime. But yes, these are real issues. Generally, they're starting to get a little better in China. But if you go to other parts of the world, Africa, India, they're not. So it's something that we all need to think about when we put something in our recycling bin because it's not a good deed necessarily. Certainly, you're doing something good, but there is an outsourcing of the responsibility and the safety issues.
You point out as well that recycling overall is on the rise, although not newsprint, because obviously fewer newspapers are being printed. But the fact that recycling is on the rise, well, that's good. But you point out it's really kind of a double-edged sword, good for the environment, but recycling in itself, which you said, dirty, dangerous, usually low-paid, low-skilled work in poor conditions.
Yeah, and one of the things I try to remind people of in the book, in the United States, we very much think of recycling as it's a good deed. You put something in the bin, it goes to green heaven. But there are always costs to raw materials, and your recycling is a raw material. Nothing, for example, is 100% recyclable. Paper can be recycled 6-7 times, depending on what it is. A lot of plastics once or twice, and then it's got to be turned into plastic lumber. Even metals, you lose some of the metals in the recycling process. So one of the things I try to point out to people at the end of the book is, recycle, that's fine. It's better than throwing away. But if you're looking at recycling from an environmental standpoint, recycling isn't the best thing you do. We have the old pyramid, reduce, reuse, recycle. I would also add repair into that. Recycle is sort of at the bottom of that environmental hierarchy, and there's all kinds of reasons, including the environmental and safety ones that you point out.
Well, Adam Minter, author of Junkyard Planet, thanks for coming to Springfield to address the Springfield Public Forum. Thanks for spending some time with us.
It's a pleasure.